How's the coalition positioning itself here?
Look, Peter Dutton has noted this was a bad decision on the part of the Trump administration, but he has spent the bulk of the time there, as we saw, trying to lay as much blame as possible at the feet of Anthony Albanese. Not even necessarily Kevin Rudd, but Anthony Albanese. Weak, incompetent, couldn't get a phone call, should have got an exemption. We got one last time. And critically, Peter Dutton is suggesting there that should he win the election, he could get an exemption for Australia. Now, that's despite the fact that Canada, Mexico, Japan, India, South Korea, the UK, France, you name it, no one's got an exemption. But Peter Dutton is arguing he could. I think this also ignores Peter Navarro, Trump's top trade advisor in the White House, saying very clearly, this is a no exemptions approach this time. That's because they feel that the exemptions that were granted last time, specifically to Australia, the deals that were done were reneged upon, that they backfired, that the exemption was a bad idea. His advice is very strongly, he's reiterated this again today, that there's a blanket no exemptions this time. But Peter Dutton reckons he could get an exemption to this. Now, look, I think, there are clearly some risks for the opposition in trying to sheet as much blame as possible home to Anthony Albanese. Here, you can understand the political imperative to do that. But what we've seen around the world when it comes to Trump tariffs is communities, local domestic populations rallying around the flag to a degree in very much blaming Trump for this. We're seeing it in Canada, we're seeing it in Mexico, we're seeing it in Europe as well. And there's the prospect here that Peter Dutton isn't adequately blaming the real source of this decision, and that is Donald Trump, for the situation we find ourselves in. So we now have quite a split over why this has been imposed, this tariff, and whether it can be resolved. And
what do you make of the response from the Prime Minister then? Has he been more forceful than anything we've seen since Mr Trump returned to the White House?
Yes, he has. The gloves are coming off, if you like. Gone is the softly approach. Today we saw Anthony Albanese's toughest language in relation to Donald Trump. He's called this unjustified, he's called this unfriendly. He's warned that this will create economic self-harm to the American people by forcing up prices. He's made clear we're not about to impose any sort of retaliatory tariffs in response to this because it would only push up prices here. But I thought this was perhaps most interesting, a fairly ominous warning about what this does to the view of the Australian people towards the United States.
It is disappointing. Australia has a close relationship with the United States. Friends need to act in a way that reinforces to our respective populations the fact that we are friends. This is not a friendly act, but it is imposed on every country, is important.
So it seems, David, that the relationship with the United States and President Trump is likely to feature in the approaching election campaign. Will that help or hurt the government?
Well, it will feature, very much so. Now, this decision has come before the proper campaign begins, but where it goes from here, whether there are further tariff decisions, we have this threat from Donald Trump of further retaliatory tariffs that could cover everything from GSTs to other government supports for various industries. Look, who is this going to help or hurt? It is difficult to know, but I would point to the surging popularity of the Liberal Party, as it's called, on the left in Canada under new leader Mark Carney, who's set to become their Prime Minister. He has taken a very tough response to Donald Trump, and that is helping him in terms of local popular support. We're not Canada. We're not facing that level of trade threat. This is fairly modest, what we're talking about with steel and aluminium. But Anthony Albanese would be watching that. He would be looking to see how it's playing in domestic politics in different parts of the world, the approach being taken to Donald Trump. And I don't think it's any mistake that after what we've seen from Canada, Anthony Albanese, after this decision, has gone in harder against Donald Trump as well. So he'd be confident that Australians will be on his side in blaming Donald Trump for this rather than himself. Look, we will see. In the meantime, he still needs to navigate this relationship. His warning there that you just heard about how this is going to play out in terms of popular views of America, of the United States, is interesting. He didn't go to, what this means for popular support for AUKUS, US access to Australian military bases, US access to critical minerals, all of those things. He doesn't want this to affect the defence relationship. But I think it's pretty evident in what he's saying that there is going to be an impact and a cost for the United States in what it's done here in terms of how Australians view this relationship.